welcome to another edition of Radical Grace Radio.
I'm Pastor Gary Held.
And my name's Matthew Pancake, and this is episode, I didn't even look, episode 836. Yeah, I got my merds mixed up there for a second. My numbers mixed up.
Yep.
Yeah, and the thing about it is like, it's interesting the things that'll happen to you because, we started this program so many years ago, kind of in I guess it's technically a coincidence, but it was in the air, that there was a movement to talk about the gospel, make that central, that some places they called it the gospel-centered movement. And it's amazing how, 15 years or so things will change. I guess it's a generational thing in some cases, but I heard some people say things that are exact opposite of what we would want to say on our program. So it's just strange because we just need to still be out there, talking about Jesus, maybe even reminding people that, that it would be good once in a while to think about the Bible isn't about you because so many people actually do think that it's about them. Spend a lot of time thinking that it's about them. And but that's the thing is like, you have to remind people of Jesus and the gospel and those things, Christ and him crucified. It's like, because they forget.
I remember listening, this was years and years ago, to a fella, kind of a radio preacher, teacher, and he was lamenting. He wasn't Lutheran, but at this particular moment, he was sounding a lot like a Lutheran because he was like, there's all these people that are, they're on to the next big kick, right? Whether it's how to be filled with the Holy Spirit or how to be, grow in obedience and Christ-likeness and all these different things, whatever was the buzz phrase, or whatever it was that was being touted as relevant at that particular moment.
Yeah.
And his observation, I thought it was like, yeah, that's pretty fair. He says, I think people are just getting bored with Jesus. They want to talk about God the Father. They want to talk about what the Holy Spirit is doing. They want to talk about this. They want to talk about that. But what about Jesus? Well, we already know about Jesus. We know about the cross. We know about, the forgiveness of sins. Now they want to get on to the next topic, kind of.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, I don't think Jesus gets boring. I really don't. So
is that how he said it?
No, he didn't. He didn't say. What did he say? I think he did say something like, "I think these people who are on to whatever the next kick was," he says, "I think they've just gotten bored with Jesus." And it's it may not be an unfair characterization. So
I think that there's something to be said for that because see, it's easy enough to forget about. We have an entire holiday that's devoted to the idea of the gospel, Jesus, crucified, raised from the dead and all that stuff. It's, and it's just there to like remind people, an entire calendar that's like designed to remind people, because otherwise they'd forget. They'd be off it'd be worse than just to the next topic. It could possibly go to the next religion, the next God, if you just leave Jesus out of the equation, or even if you make a habit out of like trying to make it, some balance of here's some Jesus and here's some other things,
Okay. Yeah. So if you seriously tried to propose that, people would look at you like, what are you talking about? I want some Jesus, but I want to balance it.
But they don't
with
say
something
it,
else.
Though. They don't say it. They just do it, and then people run with it,
So where it sounds like we're already teasing what the back half hour is going to be. But
that's all right. Technically, we're supposed to, that's the way podcasts are supposed to be run. We're supposed to tease what the back half is going to be.
Oh,
I've
been an inadequate podcaster all these many years. It's not a surprise, actually. Well,
that'll come up later more, I'm sure, because of the topic that we've got.
Not a full-time podcaster and YouTuber and content creator, unless you count. Oh yeah, I kind of have to create some content for a certain segment on Sunday morning called the sermon.
Yeah.
I guess I am a little bit professional about that. So, yeah. Okay.
Well, that's what you're actually called to do.
I know.
So either way, here's something that's not necessarily calling, but there's a number of things that I think were definitely newsworthy, and a couple of things that are a little bit on the silly side. But let's go with that thing we sometimes call the news roll. Former President Donald Trump faces a mounting challenge to his 2024 presidential run as some states have filed lawsuits seeking to keep him off their respective ballots. There's a particular way that they're going about it, based on using the 14th Amendment that disqualifies from office those political leaders who have betrayed their oath and, quote, this is actually in there, engaged in insurrection or rebellion. Lawsuits have emerged from multiple states, including New Hampshire, Arizona, and Michigan, arguing that Trump's actions during the riots on January 6th count as being an insurrection and make him ineligible for office. While Democrats like Virginia Democratic Senator Tim Kaine support arguments that Trump's actions disrupted the peaceful transfer of power, there are differing opinions on the matter. Some law professors suggest that the 14th Amendment could disqualify Trump, while others, like Hans von Spakovsky and the Heritage Foundation, vehemently disagree. Wow, I'm getting ahead of myself. Spakovsky argues that Trump has never been convicted or charged with insurrection, making claims of ineligibility, wow, that's hard to say, unfounded. Previous efforts to use Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to disqualify elected officials involved in January 6, such as Marjorie Taylor Greene and Senator Ron Johnson, have not been successful. They did try that. Trump himself, of course, dismisses the claims of ineligibility, asserting that the 14th Amendment has no legal basis in the context of the 2024 presidential election, characterizing them as attempts to steal another election.
Of course he does. Okay. Yeah. Number 4 story is that, again, we always preface it. What would the news roll be without a poll or a survey, right?
Well, all due respect, what would America be without polls and surveys?
Okay. Well,
think about it.
A Pew Research Center's recent survey reveals over half of Americans, a jaw-dropping 53%. Here's what they report. They report that they have interactions with dead relatives through dreams and through other means. Of those who reported interactions, 46% described these encounters as taking place in dreams, while 31% reported experiencing them through, quote, alternative channels. Additionally, 34% of respondents claim to have felt the presence of a deceased loved one. 28% said they had communicated about their lives with them, and 15% even reported a deceased family member had directly shared with them. 44% of Americans acknowledged that having had at least one of these experiences within the past year. All right, it's worth noting that individuals with moderate religious adherence were likelier to report extraordinary experiences than those with low or high levels of religious commitment. The study found certain religious groups, such as evangelical Protestants, historically Black Protestants, and Catholics, were more likely to report such experiences, and conversely, agnostics and atheists were less likely to report these kinds of incidents. And the Pew survey, what they did is they gathered responses from 5,079 adults in the United States. And so that's where they're getting their data from.
Mm-hmm. So, yep, that's how they do it.
I see dead people. No.
I don't quite think
it's quite
that's what
like
they
that.
mean, but yeah.
I don't think it's quite like that either.
Yeah, I don't think that's quite it. Okay, so the number 3 story, many people are worried about social media's impact on young people's mental health, and the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education in North Carolina has joined this movement. In fact, they have joined a lawsuit of over 200 school districts in the United States that are suing social media companies. Maybe this is something that should have to happen. The lawsuit alleges that these companies contribute to youth mental health crisis. As a matter of fact, what's happening is I'll save that. I have a thought about that. I'll save that for a little bit. The companies being sued are Meta, that's Facebook and Instagram, Google, YouTube, ByteDance. You might not know this. That's the company that owns TikTok, and Snap Incorporated. That's Snapchat. And that's one of the most popular ones amongst teenagers. The plaintiffs want these tech giants to change their practices to protect students' well-being, and they also argue that the companies should make their platforms less addictive. Meta and Snap responded by saying that they are committed to working with schools and experts to address teen mental health concerns. Google has stated that they are already taking steps to make YouTube safer for children and is not guilty of the allegations made in the lawsuit. At present, ByteDance, which, by the way, that's in China, hasn't commented on the case.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, this is sort of a follow-on number 2 story to something that we did report on before. We brought you the story about the Florida Baptist Convention. Well, hereafter, it's going to be FBC. That's the Florida Baptist Convention recently released results from an investigation into a cyber attack that caused losses for them of around $700,000. So the investigation was conducted in collaboration with state and federal authorities, and it got this much going. It conclusively determined that no FBC staff members were responsible for the theft. So it's not an inside job, basically. Instead, the attack was orchestrated by highly sophisticated cyber criminals of unknown identity. Ooh. The FBC has expressed its commitment to improving its financial protocols and providing cybersecurity training for its staff to prevent more incidents such as this in the future. Executive Director Treasurer Tommy Green apologized for the incident and emphasized the need for resilience and continuous improvement in the face of evolving cyber threats. After this recent cyber attack, the FBC released a set of guidelines for churches to follow to safeguard their financial assets. Okay, so that sounds good. And these guidelines include training staff to identify suspicious emails and sophisticated cyber attacks, implementing multi-factor authentication logins whenever that's possible, verbally verifying changes made to payment instructions, exploring insurance coverage for cyber attack incidents. Apparently you can get coverage for that, and seeking professional cybersecurity analysis for its IT security.
And I think that those are things that like churches ought to start thinking about, because I think some people in the church have sort of assumed that, well, that could never happen to us. $700,000, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And imagine like all of the money that you have, in your budget is just gone. That's not good. Okay, so the number 1 story, the Pentagon is taking a bold step. This is actually a follow-on to a story from July. You'll see what's going on. The Pentagon is taking a bold step in its defense strategy by investing hundreds of millions of dollars to deploy a vast network of AI-powered technology, drones, and autonomous systems over the next 2 years. Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks revealed the department is creating an array of this is how she put it, small, smart, and cost-effective artificial intelligence systems for air, land, and sea operations to keep pace with China's expanding military capabilities. The Pentagon is acting urgently to stay ahead of its adversaries, and Hicks said this. She stressed the importance of adaptability in an ever-evolving landscape. Autonomous systems must be utilized, she said, for 3 to 5 years before they didn't explain that part, before transitioning to new technologies. I think we're going to find out pretty soon what that is. One such system already in existence is called Task Force 59. I didn't know that this existed. And it was designed to monitor Iran's military activities in the Middle East. Hicks said deploying Distributed pods and self-propelled autonomous systems powered by renewable energy sources will significantly advance real-time information gathering, calling it the replicator initiative. Hicks said the Pentagon is highly enthusiastic and aims to counter China's military growth. Okay, now if you recall, back in July, Lieutenant General Richard G. Moore Jr. discussed the potential deployment of AI weapons and talked about Judeo-Christian value systems put together for what he called at the time lethal autonomous weapon systems. And it appears that the Pentagon is fully on track to fully weaponize artificial intelligence. And that is this week's Christian News Roll.
I'm sure glad those lethal systems have Judeo-Christian ethics.
Yeah, well, that's what they talked about then. And this time they're talking about surveillance. So it's like, drones that can surveil things.
Yeah.
Huh. Great. That's just all we need. And there's going to be solar powered and whatever else, right? So yeah, that's like I said, that's just all we need. But that's where they're headed. I mean, this is where the world's headed. It's AI is going to be in everything. People are going to wind up being reliant on it, like happens with all technologies. That's actually the most dangerous thing I think that happens with every technology. You just become reliant on it, and that's kind of what happens. This dovetails in with the story, and I want to get back to it because the story at number 3 story there where they're suing the social media companies. Well, there was I can't imagine what my life would have been like if I was born in, say, I don't know, if I was born in 2005 or something. And here it is, I'm 15 years old and I've got one of these things in my pocket and it's dinging every time somebody says something on Snapchat or on Twitter or whatever. And I check it every time, but the thing about it being a lawsuit, and this is something that never gets talked about lawsuits, I would be interested to find out what's going to happen if they ever reach the discovery phase. Because what that means is that lawyers on the side of the schools can sit down and ask these companies for very specific information and question them about what they know and what they don't know about what the effects of social media really is. That would be where I would be interested in finding out, because my thoughts is that, some of these companies might not want anyone to know what it is that they know about the effects of social media on people, because Facebook was caught running experiments on people.
Somewhat. I mean, I never deep dived into that story, but I remember hearing about it.
Yeah, they sent mostly negative posts to a group of people to see how they would react, like what their responses would be like. Surprise, surprise, people would respond negatively. I mean, and they were running experiments like that, and there was like people who run experiments for real were questioning the ethics of doing that, because those are real people and they have no informed consent into what it is they're doing, what they're being subjected to. So
we're just throwing science at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Seeing what sticks, right?
Okay.
It's like, yep, we're going to have this big anyway. So I mean, there's a lot of cyber stuff in here.
I was just thinking about the number 4 story, and this is they kind of overplayed it, I think. Because so a whopping jaw-dropping 53% of those that, got surveyed, they've reported interactions with dead relatives. Okay, well, but when it says through dreams, well, people will dream about folks that, they've been gone a long time in some cases, but they'll still have dreams about them. And then it says by other means. And then it says of those, this is my story about they reported interactions. 46% describe these encounters as taking place in dreams, and they've talk about the 34% of the respondents claim to have felt the presence of a deceased loved one. Well, okay, I mean, is all this stuff really I mean, you can argue that it's not a good. It's sort of makes is doctrinally very suspect. How could you really be feeling the presence of somebody there with you? But I mean, people are reporting what they think they're feeling. Well, is that so
Right.
outrageous?
Well, on top of that, I mean, before we started the show, I pointed out that, like, they say on here, 28% said that they communicated
Right,
about their lives with them. Okay, so, but the thing is like, there's always people that, like, they'll visit
yep,
a cemetery and they'll go to the grave and nobody's standing there and they'll talk to the person as though they're alive. I don't think for 1 second anybody that does that believes that they're going to get a
right,
response, because
right,
they're dead, and but they do it anyway. Um, who knows, for a
right,
variety of reasons. One of them is like, you might just be talking about something. You don't have an opportunity to talk about a thing that you kind of need to talk about, but don't have a way to do it. And if if it's true that the best way to think is to talk, then it's actually good for them. But I don't think that, like, a lot of these people, like I looked at the page that has the that's actually at Pew Research, and I didn't find a whole lot in there about how you measure how deeply they believe that these experiences are, like, significant. I didn't see that in the, like, how would you
right.
even measure that? Like, it just all be self-reporting. Oh yeah, I think it was highly significant that I saw my mom in a dream. And that means
Yeah.
what? I mean, and
And,
who,
and I'm not sure
it
what
just,
their point really was in describing the folks that kind of saying they didn't use this word, but kind of a middling amount of religious adherence. So they're not atheists, they're not agnostics, they're not, of course, atheists and agnostics, even if they had a strange experience, they're not going to report it because that's going to ruin their credibility with their atheist community. They're by and large materialists.
right.
And so and then the other part is, the people who have got, a highly religious background. Well, they may be saying that they're highly religious, and if they're saying, or they have a doctrinal basis for saying these kinds of experiences are already all automatically suspect, because the dead in Christ go to be with the Lord, and who, it doesn't really tell us everything about what happens to those who are not in Christ, but they die, and there doesn't seem to be any middle ground for people to be, or presences to be hanging around. So the strict doctrinaires would say, well, then I didn't really have that experience, or I'm going to interpret it as mostly my mind at work,
Right.
because that would not fit with my theology. So both, in other words, both extremes have guiding presuppositions about this has to be real, and if the whatever the experience is, if it contradicts it, well, then that's got to be suspect. But whereas the people who are mildly or moderately religious, they kind of think, yeah, it's a strange world and there's spiritual stuff going on, but I don't really know that much about, anything for sure. So they're just reporting things and not being very
Yeah.
critical about what they think they're experiencing. That's so okay.
Yeah. And I'm not sure
I
how
don't think it is.
significant it would be, even if, it's, but Pew Research, I'm sure they had their
Oh
reasons.
yeah,
Somebody asked for it to be done, and they're looking for certain information. I'm not sure what it would
yeah.
have been.
Well, it's
Um,
too bad the Florida
Now,
Baptist Convention underwent a cyber attack. I mean, that's a lot of money stolen. I'm sure it represents donations that were given unto the Lord. And so, ultimately where the source of that money came from. So, so
right.
somebody who is, what was the description? I'm glad they found out that, or they pretty well determined it can't be somebody working from the inside, but they
Yeah.
had we had a interesting way, highly sophisticated cyber criminals of unknown identity. Well, yeah, I mean, all that means is that nobody took
Well, nobody's
responsibility for it.
right. Right. And the thing is like verbally verifying changes made to payment instructions. Okay, so that's in there because that's kind of how it happened. That someone received an email that looked like it was from someone in the organization who said that we need to change our payment processor somehow or other. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it turns out that that was
Yeah.
from the hackers, and it was a clever way to get someone to log into a page that they weren't supposed to be logging into, and that gave them access to bank accounts, and boom, there it went. And that was just that and that's the thing, is like, I think it's really important, like, someone sends an email, pick up the phone, call them. So, just verifying that that's
Right.
the real thing. It's like, or just don't send that kind of an email at all. That way, you don't have that problem. I mean, and I think that churches are going to have to really start thinking about this, because I know that big churches, they'd have to do that. I mean, Matt, I know that we wouldn't want to talk about it, but let's just talk about Joel Osteen's church for a second. Millions, who knows how many millions of dollars flows through that organization. And I guarantee you that they've got somebody making sure that they're as tight as they can be. Because who would want that much money to disappear at any given moment, right? It's like, nope.
Yeah, they're going to need to take reasonable precautions. That's for sure. So
yeah. So that's the thing. So do you think it's reasonable? I mean, it's like opening up Pandora's box. With
I was getting too ready to mention it. So I have a suspicion that this is not going to actually accomplish anything. I mean, they're going to say they're going to use the 14th Amendment, and you can at least listen to their argument and see what you think of it. But there's that one point, that rebuttal point, I guess, that the Heritage Foundation fella was arguing. He says, well, he hasn't been charged with insurrection. So, what are you doing? Just because something doesn't, smell right to you, that you think that you can therefore take him off the ballot? Well, there's a lot of voters that are going to say, hey, let me decide who I'm voting for. And well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if people say, go ahead, take him off the ballot? I'm going to write him in.
I'll write him in.
What are you going to do? I mean, so I think this.
I mean, you've already got.
I think there's a constitutional issue here that ought to be looked at. I just don't think that the people who want to make use of it for this purpose just strikes me as unlikely that they're going to be successful in that. So,
yeah, I don't think they're going to. I don't think it's going to come to anything either. I mean, it just comes down to people are still the water is still stirred up over the first election, COVID, and everything, because all that was all coincidental, and people's ability to think was compromised, and in some quarters, in some cases, people's ability to think is still compromised. They have made so much hay out of this over the last, it's been almost it's been 3 years now. It's working on being 4 years. It's just, it sucks all the air out of the room. There's an awful lot of things that the world could be talking about. And this just sucks all the air out of the room. Just you bring up Trump and boom, there's a million opinions, that fall on one side of the fence or the other. And there's just so many, it boggles my mind. And, I'm the one that put it in here, but the thing is like, this is news. See, here's what's not news. The 14th Amendment disqualifies people from, who've, gone against their oath and engaged in insurrection. They're disqualified from office. That's not news. That's just civics. It is news if there are states that are trying to keep, whether we like it or not, a valid candidate off of their ballots. Especially one like Trump. That is news. So I can't necessarily leave it out. But this is one of those cases that this is the reason why we have the news roll, is because this is the stuff that's on Christians' minds.
And I would like to I'd hasten to say, on an issue like this, reasonable Christians could differ. I mean, honestly, like, for instance, I don't really know much about Senator Tim Kaine. I don't know as much about some of these other officials. But if they, like, quite likely in the case of somebody who's from Virginia, I don't know anything about him personally, but I wouldn't be surprised if he claimed some sort of Christian religious affiliation, right? I mean, probably. Right. Well, okay. Yeah. So why should I doubt that he actually is a Christian, right? I mean, so there's people that, who are Christian, who are trying to look at this, and maybe they're constitutional experts and maybe they're not, but they're going to look at it and they're going to come to a conclusion, at least on their own, whether the amendment it comes into play here.